Someone asked me once if I remembered how it all went down, as if it happened so long ago that anyone could forget.
Days Gone was announced during E3 in 2016. By that point, we'd already seen post-apocalyptic games, games with zombies, games with deep narratives, and games that combined all three. Yet Days Gone still felt unique. It was how these elements came together to create something new that got so many excited. The lush Oregon environment contrasted with so much death. The biker vibe set on the open road. The sense of loss with the smallest glimmers of hope. But when we saw the Horde for the first time, that was a game changer. There was nothing else like it, and frankly, there hasn't been anything else like it since. The reveal for Days Gone set the world on fire, but when the game released, the reviews weren't kind, and it's unlikely we'll ever get a sequel. So what happened? Today, we're going to take a look at the game, the story surrounding its development and release, and why the reviews were flat out wrong. I'm Adam Scott, and this is Days Gone. Developed by Bend Studio, the studio behind Bubsy 3D, but don't hold that against them. They're most known for the excellent Siphon Filter series and some of the best portable versions of AAA games, with Resistance Retribution, Uncharted Golden Abyss, and Uncharted Fight for Fortune. Their bread and butter has always been single-player, narrative-driven games, but when Sony told them they could create something totally new, they wanted to swing for the fences. They pushed themselves to develop an experience that was bigger and more ambitious than anything they'd worked on before. Many of the core design elements pushed the studio beyond their experience, but were essential for delivering something special, including their first open-world game, motorcycle riding gameplay and mechanics, a deep combat sandbox, and of course, the Horde. Development took 6 years, and the studio grew threefold to support it. In 2019, Days Gone released to the world on PS4. As the reviews started to pour in, there was something odd. They were far lower than what everyone was expecting, certainly lower than any of the exclusive first-party PlayStation games, landing at roughly 71 on Metacritic. VGC said, Days Gone is far from the worst specimen of its genre, but in a year already packed with 50-hour-plus endeavors, it rarely makes the case for its own existence. EGM said Days Gone is derivative and beset by astounding technical problems. Days Gone is a rare misfire among Sony's first-party efforts. And IGN said Days Gone feels bloated, like a movie that goes on for an hour longer than it needs to or should've. There were well over 100 critical reviews that in hindsight had suspiciously similar criticisms, mostly noting an uninspired story, boring gameplay, and technical issues. So for me, and I'm sure many others, it tempered our excitement. It was no longer the must-play title I was hoping for, so I waited to check it out. When I finally got around to experiencing the game for myself, I realized it, in fact, wasn't a good game. It was great. I kept waiting for the boredom to set in, but it never did. I ended up doing absolutely everything and completing the game 100%. So let's take a look at the game as I experienced it. The Days Gone story is a complex, highly interwoven tapestry. Every detail, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, serves the larger story and world. The game opens as society is collapsing at the start of a global pandemic, a scenario that was all too real in 2020 when I played the game. Many died, but a large portion of humanity were changed into violent, zombie-like creatures called freakers. Outlaw bikers Deacon St. John, played by Sam Witwer, Boozer, played by Jim Peary, and Deacon's wife Sarah, played by Courtney Draper, attempt to flee to safety. They find a Nero helicopter that has room for 2 more occupants. While Sarah boards the helicopter, Deacon stays behind to tend to Boozer, who's injured. Deacon promises to reunite with his wife. Two years later, Deacon and Boozer are working as mercenaries in Oregon. Sarah didn't make it. The refugee camp she was taken to was overrun by freakers. The two men are trying to cobble together some semblance of a new life, but times are bleak and hope is in short supply. When Deacon learns there's the slimmest possibility that Sarah may actually still be alive after all this time, it sets him and the story into motion. What happened to Sarah? What's behind the pandemic? And is a cure possible to end this nightmare? I was hooked by the story early on and was invested throughout as the world came more into focus. Even with the global stakes, the story always feels personal. You connect with Deacon. He's flawed with just as many layers as the world. He'll do whatever it takes to survive and will fiercely fight to protect those he cares about. The gameplay in Days Gone feels a lot like Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and The Last of Us had a baby, and that baby rides a motorcycle. You'll traverse a large open environment, set in Oregon, which is actually where Ben's studio is located. This setting offers a lot of variety, from snowy mountains to deserts, making it an ideal setting for a sandbox game like this. Resources like ammo, crafting supplies, and even gasoline for your bike are all in short supply, so you have to constantly scrounge and conserve as you play. You can't simply visit a store to buy what you need, at least not at first. You'll work to establish trust with the various settlement camps and earn camp credits by completing missions. You'll only ever get enough resources to get by, but not enough to feel indestructible. And this is such a smart design choice, as it raises the stakes of each battle. It also gently pushes you to get out into the world to collect items, roping you into its satisfying gameplay loop almost right away. Beyond the main quests, there's a ton of side objectives, which include clearing freaker nests, rescuing hostages, clearing enemy camps, capturing bounty targets, and restoring power to the checkpoints for the National Emergency Response Organization, also known as NERO. Inside NERO checkpoints, you can use injectors to permanently boost Deacon's health, stamina, used when Deacon is sprinting or dodging, and focus, which allows Deacon to temporarily slow time when aiming his ranged weapons. You'll gain experience points for completing missions and objectives, which you'll use to level up and unlock new abilities, increasing the efficiency of Deacon's melee and ranged weapons, and to enhance his survival skills. There's a ton of freedom where you can tackle objectives in a number of different ways, really only limited by your gameplay style and imagination. Go in stealthy, distracting enemies and silently taking out each one. Attach noise suppressors to various firearms so you don't attract too much attention. And use survival vision to highlight items of interest and nearby enemies. Or go in guns blazing with a wide variety of weapons such as pistols, shotguns, sniper rifles, submachine guns, and crossbows. Each weapon has different statistics, and higher tier weapons are generally more powerful. Go quietly? Yeah, right. Blow enemies to smithereens with proximity mines, grenades, Molotov cocktails, and more. You'll also have all sorts of melee weapons, but beware, they'll break if not repaired regularly. It's a hearty, if familiar mix of stealthing through enemy camps, combat, upgrades, and crafting, with occasional bouts of running like hell away from the freaker hordes. You'll progress from a working-to-live drifter to developing community ties and putting down roots that give you something to fight for, and the progression is very satisfying.
Good thing someone around here knows how to make things happen.
Crafting plays a big role in the overall experience and how prepared you are. You'll collect all sorts of scrap and resources as you explore that you can use for crafting. As you acquire new crafting recipes, you'll be able to create increasingly elaborate items and contraptions. They'll start out really basic, but eventually you'll be able to make bombs, traps, and all manner of Mad Max-style weapons for brutally dispatching your foes in satisfyingly gory ways. The variety of items you can create using the knickknacks you find lying around adds to the myriad ways to tackle each combat encounter. Deacon is a conflicting character. He's likable and funny for the most part, with quips and wisecracks with the supporting cast, but this isn't Uncharted, and not everything's a joke. Sam Witwer's performance has an easygoing charm right up there with the best in the business.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, but you gotta kind of aim it at them first.
I've never done
But he's also prone to bouts of callous and unrepentant hatred, murderous aggression, or outright brutality that can grate against the lighter moments. If you're one of those people who struggle to accept the ludonarrative dissonance when Nathan Drake kills hundreds of people, you're gonna lose your mind when Deke commits literal war crimes and borderline terrorism twice. However, the brutality, as hard as it is at times, doesn't feel out of place in this uncaring world.
this.
Deacon's bike is just as much a character and integral to the story and overall design of the game. It's how Deacon navigates the world, and is often the only way to outrun those with murderous intentions. This isn't GTA, so there aren't vehicles everywhere. Nor is this Red Dead Redemption, where you can whistle and a horse comes running. Your bike stays where you leave it, which actually takes a little time getting used to. Not only does Deacon have a deep connection with his bike, but it's integral to the gameplay. You can only fast travel and save when near your bike. It consumes fuel and becomes disabled if excessively damaged. You'll have to regularly refuel at gas stations and camps and repair it using collected scrap. Your bike is every bit as important as your weapons or other tools, evolving and changing with you over time. You can upgrade parts to improve its performance and durability, or add saddlebags to increase your storage capacity. And you can deck it out, customizing its look to make it feel like it's yours. And hey, you can't go wrong with flames on your gas tank. You'll need all of your gear in tip-top shape to give you a chance against everything that wants you dead. The main monsters, aside from the people, are the Freakers. Often they're described as zombies or zombie-like, but make no mistake, they are very much alive, just mutated and infected with a virus that makes them ravenous. Think of the creatures in 28 Days Later.
Are you okay?
The Freakers are impressive as they come in all shapes and sizes. Swarmers hide in their nests during the daytime, but often congregate, wander around, and search for food and water at night. The Screamers shriek to alert and draw in any Freakers in the area, so you'll want to take them out quietly. Newts are infected adolescents and opportunistic hunters who keep their distance and only attack when you're at your weakest. The Breakers are big brutes all juiced up and able to pummel you into a fine paste. Reachers are fast and actually resemble humans, making them more unnerving. There are even infected animals to contend with, like bears, birds, and wolves, that are always hungry for your face. Early on, even a single enemy can kill you, and if 2 or 3 catch your scent, forget about it. So you'll start creeping cautiously around forests, hoping for stealth kills, terrified of every leafy noise in the distance. Later though, you'll be tooled up and taking on bigger and bigger groups of enemies. It's kind of a gradual, satisfying growth that evolves without being obvious until you look back and see how far you've come. Even when you're high level and kitted out with the best gear, the Freaker hordes are always butt-clenching encounters. These are massive groups, ranging anywhere from 50 to 500 different enemies that, when alerted, all come at you at once. Simply seeing the sheer number of Freakers on screen at any given time is one of Days Gone's greatest highlights. I don't care how many zombie games you've played before, you've never seen anything quite like this. Seeing them scream as hundreds of clawing, frenzied creatures flow over cars or around buildings like a bucket of grasping hands splashed onto the world never gets old. These enemies move and behave so realistically, it's terrifying. These events aren't scripted, nor are they just brain-dead AI. They all act as living, breathing individuals that want to kill you. A few places have a scattering of explosive barrels and trucks to help thin them out, but otherwise, it's generally a case of careful planning that you quickly throw out the window when you're overwhelmed. And that's not to mention the other humans or cultists who use weapons and more advanced tactics to bring your insides to the outside. Needless to say, there's a lot of variety in the gameplay, and a lot of different and interesting and terrifying situations to contend with. With everything out to kill you, there are few moments to catch your breath and take in the scenery, but when you do, you'll realize that Days Gone has some of the most impressive visuals of Sony's first-party catalog for the PS4 generation. This game looks absolutely stunning, from its realistic character models, the believable depiction of Bend, Oregon, and its incredibly horrendous enemies, with enough visual variety even with swarms of hundreds. The trees, mountains, and atmosphere make this game feel so immersive, it's hard to put down. And of course, playing this years later on a PS5, the performance is rock solid and buttery smooth. The music is equally impressive, composed by Nathan Whitehead, who said the game's music combines folk Americana and a touch of rock elements, and is a perfect fit for the setting. The instrumentation is centered around guitar, which Whitehead said was an obvious choice for both the character of Deacon, a bounty hunter and biker, and for the Pacific Northwest setting. The music was built up in layers, allowing for dynamically adding or removing elements to fit what was happening on screen. It's quite impressive and adds a ton of texture to the world. A single playthrough of the main story will take around 30 to 40 hours. If you're looking to get the Platinum Trophy, layer in another 20 hours or so to complete all of the side quests, build trust with all of the camps, and unlock all of Deacon's skills. However, even after getting the Platinum Trophy, you're still only 70% complete. To do the rest, you'll need to beat the story on New Game Plus, and complete the game on Survival difficulty, which lowers your health, strengthens your enemies, and strips away any niceties you've grown accustomed to, like your HUD. And lastly, you'll have to complete a series of challenge missions. There's no shortage of things to do and just a ton of value for the price. You could easily spend up to 80 to 100 hours doing everything in this game, and having a really good time doing it too. At launch, the performance wasn't great, with a lot of jank familiar to large open-world games, including physics and visual glitches, lengthy load times, and frame rate issues, so criticisms about performance were absolutely valid. Ben Studio put out consistent updates to not only improve performance, but to add more content. And while far too many games are released in a semi-broken state and fixed after launch, other great games have recovered. But the reviews for Days Gone never did, and it's a shame considering some people still think this game is mediocre at best. Good thing reviews don't always translate to sales. While we don't have the full picture in terms of total sales, there are a few things we do know. When the game launched, it was one of the best-selling games of 2019. In Japan, the game exceeded lifetime sales for God of War and Horizon Zero Dawn. In January 2022, director Jeff Ross claimed on Twitter that the game had sold over 8 million copies by late 2020. That figure is disputed, however, it's clear this game sold very well despite the lower than expected review scores. In 2022, Ben Studio pitched a sequel to Sony, but was rejected, so it's unlikely we'll see a sequel anytime soon. However, Deadline reported a film adaptation is in the works, so there's still some life in the property. Is Days Gone perfect? No, no game is, but it's criminally underrated. Days Gone should go down as one of the great PlayStation flagship properties. And while most of the game consists of elements we've seen before, Days Gone is very much greater than the sum of its parts. Getting lost on the open road, discovering the multifaceted and layered story, and fighting for your life against 500 bloodthirsty ghouls, and I promise you'll see why this is one of the most underrated games in the past decade. So if you've never played this game before, or if you haven't played it since launch, don't let another day go by without picking it up.
And I'm gonna do a lot worse than snap off an antenna.
I'm sorry about your wife, but you're not the only one who lost someone that night.
Alright, there's Days Gone. You've heard my take, and I'd love to hear yours as well. Also, what's your favorite underappreciated game? Let's talk about it in the comments down below. If you liked the video, hit like and subscribe. And if you want another amazing game, check out my video right here. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.